Well met, lords and ladies, Jacob Butter speaking, and a warm welcome to this week's Walking Wednesday. And indeed it is a warm one today. Unlike last time I was in this particular neighbourhood, there was no storm on the horizon. But unfortunately it seems that there are some dark clouds of the metaphorical variety that might come over and seek to obfuscate the world as we know it for certain people of a certain age bracket. And it's for that reason that I see myself obligated to break one of my fundamental rules of this channel, just this once, and talk about politics. But why am I doing that, basically? Well, it all started on Monday, essentially, because I think that's when the announcement in question went out. So, as I said last week, I did have one final trip over to the town much further away from me that I said I was not going back to after that point. That was the deal, and that is exactly what happened. I went to the morning class, and then afterwards I had to try to find a different parking space and was walking towards the other school, the afternoon one, which, because of how that place actually navigates and such, the only space that I actually found that I felt safe actually parking in that wouldn't result in a fine or something was 40 minutes away walking. Fortunately, I had just enough time, but it seems like during that time something major actually went down, because when I actually arrived there and set up and welcomed the first students in, one of said first students asked me immediately if I had heard the announcement from Sir Keir Starmer. For those that don't know, because a lot of you are international, Sir Keir Starmer is the current UK Prime Minister. And the answer was no, because I was walking over to the school. But even then, regardless of the circumstance of the journey, I most likely would not have heard about this. It was something that was shown in apparently this student's class, and got him quite rightfully, I think, mad as a result of it. And he also said that his entire class was crying. You could tell that he had still the residuals of that. And that's, of course, the announcement that that as of spring 2027, they hope to bring this change about. There will be a ban in place across the UK for all social media for anyone under the age of 16. Well, I say all social media. That's technically not entirely true, but I'll come back to that. And yeah, as soon as I heard about that, I was thinking like, okay, wow, that's a lot to process for anyone, quite frankly. I can understand why, the waterworks were going in that class. Keep the waters working as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I was taken aback by the suddenness of it, as are quite a lot of other people, actually. Actually, on the way back, as I was driving back, I did hear an announcement on the radio that was, not an announcement on the radio, but a news report on the radio talking about the announcement, and people also still feel like this is definitely rushed, and in the words of the reporter, possibly tied to the Prime Minister's political future. There were some comments when I actually finally did see the announcement for myself, like, the following day, that suggested, yes, ban for anyone under 16. They can vote at 16. What is he thinking? I'm not sure if that's in place or not. That's just what the comments said. So of course, this kind of thing is going to cause uproar on social media, because why wouldn't it? And I did listen to it afterwards, because I wanted to hear, obviously, the actual announcement itself, because there were some things that I felt like, from the way the student was reporting this to me that didn't quite make sense. Like, for example, he apparently said that if anyone under age 16 was caught on social media, that they would be able to find them and arrest them, which, from the announcement itself, I have seen no evidence of. There was not a single mention. In fact, this is one of the things that I actually do like about how they're going about this. Sir Keir Starmer actually did say that that the punishments for infractions on this matter would go to the platforms themselves rather than the individuals, because he is very much aware that that kids and teens are going to find ways around this. You know, he said multiple times, because people asked him the same questions, he kind of went back to the same talking points. He said multiple times that that, you know, does this mean there'll be no child on social media, no British child on social media from this point onwards? No, of course not. If people don't remember, a while ago the Online Safety Act was passed. That's the reason that a lot of websites have implemented, like, you know, new age verifications that have not gone down so well, because they require you to either take a picture of your face, like, you know, sometimes multiple times, which then gets deleted according to them, or show your ID from hackable clients, of course. So, you know, not the best method either, but very, very tame in comparison to what has been promised. In fact, he also mentions that there have been similar effects in Australia, but he says that, you know, that his methods of enforcement, which were not elaborated upon, are going to go a step further than Australia, so that they could learn from how those ideas have been circumvented up until now. I don't know what they did in Australia, and neither did he elaborate during that time. So that's something else for me to potentially look into afterwards. Going back to the student for a second, you know, of course, his... sorry, there's a wind over here, I'm going to turn over here. Like I said before, I completely understand his outrage. I also understand Sir Keir Starmer's perspective on this, because I feel like anyone, you know, with any amount of sense, you know, will realize that when he says that, you know, there are a bunch of unregulated ways in which kids are able to meet, particularly adult strangers, and potentially subjected to different forms of abuse from said adult strangers. That's been an issue on the internet since the dawn of time, honestly. And particularly as someone who uses Discord a lot, I have actually heard a few stories from people specifically about this. Discord has, on the internet itself, is sort of infamous for the potential to find predators. Essentially, that's kind of what, you know. That's the meta surrounding the discussion of Discord. And Discord itself, of course, has had age ratings. You know, has an age rating of 13 since its inception, I think. Or that might have been doled out later. I'm not entirely sure. I can personally vouch for the fact that there are a lot of people, particularly in like some of the servers that I found myself in, because obviously the gacha community, that do not abide by this. The student in question was also concerned about like his YouTube channel, having to delete it, and considering that he told me his YouTube channel, because the plan that he wanted to do was he wanted to make a protest. I suggested like some sort of petition, because he brought up the fact that you know, he said that if like if there were, he said at first 10,000, but then it's like 100,000 signatures, it might actually get taken to get discussed in Parliament again. Having watched the announcement, it does seem like, Sir Keir Starmer said that he's not going to compromise on this. So I'm not entirely sure about that either. But unfortunately, it seems like when I looked up the name that the student gave me for like his channel, it didn't show up. So I fear that he might have already deleted it. My regret is that I didn't tell him to save his videos, because I heard him vaguely say that he only had 3 up, but even then, as somebody who, has definitely, said, that even your old videos are, a demonstration of who you were at the time that you made them, or the time that you released them, or whatever, and there's something that is worth preserving. Which is also another reason why I'm not happy with this decision, because essentially that's denying a lot of people that same opportunity. YouTube itself has once again also had a rating of 13, supposedly, for creating channels, not for navigating it necessarily. But that's also because, going back to 2019, when they talked about copper and the fines around that, that's because they were collecting data from under 13-year-olds, which has been illegal since copper was introduced in like 1999 or something like that. Or was it 1990? Sometime in decades gone by. And so yeah, that's why a lot of the changes were actually doled out. And I remember, particularly, KW has talked about this, so I can mention her by name, but she's talked about this publicly, how she deleted like all of her old videos out of a fear of either not being copper compliant, or it was Article 13 copyright concern, because she did say 2018, and the copper fines and changes were rolled out in 2019. So either she's misremembering the year or the context behind them. But either way, one of those two changes or proposed changes to the internet, 'cause I don't think Article 13 went through in the end. One of those either changes or proposed changes caused her to have such a panic that she deleted everything, didn't save that stuff, and now can't get it back. So, her channel's history, like her legacy was just gone. And as somebody whose legacy extends as far back as hers, give or take a couple of months extra, yeah, that's always like heartbreaking to hear. I mean, a lot of people delete their videos voluntarily because they find them to be cringe at some point. But, if there's a chance of regret of those, I would of course suggest saving them anyway because of that. So, but even then, that comes from my belief in being able to find those ways to express yourself, or to mark your identity as far as you're comfortable going, as far as it's safe to do so. Obviously, don't dox yourself. There's a reason that I keep changing locations for Walking Wednesday, for example. But yeah, I will also say, I guess, to a certain extent, I do have a little bit of bias on the grounds that this is something I think I've don't really have anything to prove, but I have a firm belief on. I think I am one of the first people to have had their basically entire life documented on the internet. I say that because when I was born, up until I was, up until like maybe, honestly, like 5 or 6, or maybe even like further, maybe like 7, depends. My parents had a website that no longer exists, so don't try and find it. The domain is gone, but it was one that they basically shared, pictures and anecdotes of us, the same way that someone would use a photo album for those things. But them being the tech savvy people that they were, they decided to put that together, and that's basically Instagram to a certain degree. Or at a pinch, you know, video-wise, you could equate it to family vlog channels, albeit not widespread across the entire internet. This was still in the decentralized internet days. So unless you knew the name of the domain, you weren't going to most likely stumble across it by accident. Yeah, it was just basically family members watching it. And then afterwards, of course, I've already talked about this one, Madrid Madness, directly after that, covering the time in Spain, or even like almost directly before. It's like one person before we moved there, but that was like to, you know, set the website up and everything. That was on Blogspot. So this is like centralized time, sort of. Again, particular domain to be found. Speaking of Spain, it's like being back there already. But yeah, that was a thing throughout the entire time we were there. And then there's only like stopped when we actually moved away, and there was like a brief time where there was nothing. Basically, what amounted to a year of school life, and even then, my channel was created. Was set up also by my mum, my brother. I think they coordinated that and figured out how to do it, so that I could actually upload certain videos to show to one of my teachers for a project. And then I ended up, you know, renaming the channel, then changing everything, and like, you know, making it my personal YouTube channel. I was old enough to do so. I was 13, so I wasn't breaking any rules. And basically went from there. And then, you know, that's been half of my life, and the other half was covered by other people. So yeah, it's something that I understand comes as second nature to me, because that's just what I have always known to one degree or another. I can definitely also, you know, go back as far as iCarly and thinking of, you know, my own personal focus on the internet, but you know, that's a whole other matter. But yeah, that's one thing that I'm sad is not going to be an option for people until a certain point now, because, I mean, again, even just looking back across the channel itself, you can just see the differences. Or like, even like the times that I've read out certain things from Madrid Madness, either the evolution of my and the family's dominion of the Spanish language, or that time that I actually found the first ever review that I did. It's just something to show, because I've always been, you know, because I've always loved the idea of like showing like evolution, you know, or thinking about it, whether it's a TV show or the case of a YouTube channel, an individual. You know, that was YouTube's motto: YouTube, broadcast yourself. And that being an open option was always one of my favorite things. I'm glad that I had that. I had that chance, and I feel for anyone who's having that taken away from them, albeit temporarily, but for someone that's going to take years. The student in question I was talking before, he's not that old. He's going to have to wait quite some time before he's 16. I'm not going to say his exact age because, you know, I'm not crazy, but, you know, that's just to give an idea. So yeah, he was rightfully outraged, and if he did decide to go through with his protest, I was gonna you know, like, back him up. The reason I asked for his channel was so that I could refer people over to him to support that cause. And yeah, there's a lot of causes that people have been able to support for under 16s on YouTube that are even like greater scope. The fastest subscribed channel on all of YouTube is a channel called Tommy11, that that belonged to a kid who unfortunately was diagnosed with cancer, and his biggest dream was to become a famous YouTuber. So people rallied over to offer him support on the videos for as long as he was able to make them, and unfortunately he's no longer with us. But his dream was realized because of that. And yeah, he wasn't that old. He was definitely under 60. I don't know how old he was, but yeah, he was, yeah. Even going back to Discord, I think about, yes, there's absolutely a risk involved in going on Discord, frankly, at any age, but especially when you're younger. Particularly the social medias where, you know, where like the whole point is to be able to message people and actually have direct interactions, more so than YouTube, which since they abolished YouTube Friends in like 2010 has not really had that as prominently. Because it's much more about like content creation itself, which, yes, there is definitely a point to say that you know, child influencers have not, much like child actors, do not have the best environments. You know, Ryan's Toys World being the best known example of this. I don't even have to elaborate on that one. Just saying the words Ryan's Toys World, I said that in the room with everyone. They all knew who Ryan was, which was kind of the problem. So, or who Ryan is, I should say. He's still somewhat active on that channel, but it's being replaced by, apparently, according to them, his 2-year-old sisters. I don't know if they're actually 2, but they are definitely young. So yeah, not the best. In terms of Discord, the reason why, again, a full-on ban I feel like is a terrible idea is because the people that I've met on Discord particularly, a lot of them found each other as a community of people that would actually support them through terrible times. They basically were trapped in abusive households. There's no two ways around that. They were denied the chance to go to therapy. Some of them were able to do so, but only in the company of the people who were the active causes of their mental health issues. And up until meeting each other, they didn't have the of anyone in their corner, it seemed. They were able, the gacha community, Everly has actually said this before, that it felt like, you know, there was a lot of kids that wanted an outlet. The way that I criticize gacha is more so on the grounds of like how effective their storytelling is and what kind of message they're sending if they're doing it the right way. I understand the impulse entirely to either make edgy content or you know, make something to vent for people. I just hope that it has more positive impact than, you know, than a negative one. That's really where my concern was with that stuff. But yeah, gacha community particularly, but also anyone else on Discord who was like in that general like proximity, because, you know, we had like our own like circle or something. It pains me to say, but I cannot say with absolute certainty that all of those people would be alive today were it not for social media and for the chance to realize they are not alone in the world. I want to say more about this, but I need to remove some files and add some space. So I'm going to pause quickly so I can do that because I'm running out of space right now. Okay, and we're back. I found the space. So actually, this is a good chance to really talk about the second thing I want to mention. Although, by the way, actually, right after I cut the cameras, I had a kid approached me and asked me, if, you know, what I was doing in terms of, you know, making this this video. I really should have asked him about what he thought, actually. Again, as part of the affected demographic. Would have been great to have like a direct quote, but I messed that up. But hey, he said he might subscribe and watch some videos, so if you're the person who stopped me a few moments ago and asked me some questions, let me know what you think about all this, if you made it this far into the video, because Walking Wednesday is quite boring sometimes, I do acknowledge that. And today we're talking about politics, so even worse. But no. In general, probably best time to talk about the second aspect of this, which is referring to gaming. Because that was also part of the announcement. It was that games would have to be more responsible about making sure that kids, particularly under 16, but outside their age demographic, would not be able to access them. This part I understand a lot more, because arguably that should have already been happening. It's one of those things that is ignored quite a lot by game companies, because they know that that's where a lot of their clientele comes from. Because obviously, if you have a game that's like rated, 18 plus or something, like say GTA, for example, if a kid plays it, they feel much more mature. It's completely natural. And of course, something that's been circumvented for ages, but it's been ignored. So I get that to some degree. My student also said that that he had to delete all of his games as a result, which would be very awful. I mean, I would even think about this. I'm sure even Minecraft multiplayer is going to have to potentially change if that's the case. I mean, I'm curious about that, because I found out that actually the average age of a Minecraft player nowadays is 24. It's just that a lot of the time the adult clientele is getting largely ignored because of how the game has been branded up until now. It's one of those things where, because it's lasted for so long, a lot of the audience have matured and grown up so much as a result. Myself included, obviously. But yeah, in terms of other games, again, it's one of those things that that I hope is implemented smartly. Because my favorite rapper of all time is Dan Bull. My favorite rap song of Dan Bull's is the one that he did for Gamers Without Borders, which was a charity that was supporting people during the pandemic. And it was all about how gaming saved his life, and various other things as well, about how much he's been able to learn from gaming, and the people that he's been able to meet who are who live in such different places to him, and such different walks of life, to use that somewhat outdated phrase, which is an aspect of both social media and games that I feel is also very important. Imagine if this were invented in the US, for example, and Sir Keir Starmer did say he was planning to talk about this with President Trump, right after making the announcement. Basically, they had some meetup or summit together. I don't remember the exact thing, what it was called. It was the G something. But imagine if that was implemented in somewhere like the US, which already, let's be honest here, already it feels very isolated and detached from the rest of the world. How many of us have seen either videos of Americans not having a perspective of their own history outside of their own nation. Some of them even say, for example, that there are no other nations that, or not many other nations that have lasted 250 years. Which, yes, there are. Most of them, in fact. So, and that's because, again, I can say this as somebody who has been partially through the American education system, at least a little bit. The focus is always on America. I don't remember learning a thing in elementary school about anywhere outside of America that wasn't Canada. And that was only because we were talking about we were talking about the about where a lot of the slaves in the South would go, and if they could make their way up to Canada. Which even then, considering how much that is muddied in that history, who knows how true that really was. But yeah, that was the only mention of anywhere outside that I can recall from elementary. Beyond that is a little bit of mystery, but again, I have enough Americans that watch me normally that can back this up. There's even like a person on YouTube Shorts that did say that, they were an American whose kid was going to British school because they'd moved, and so the difference being like, American education, according to them, prepares you to be a citizen of America. British education prepares you to be a citizen of the world. At least that's from their perspective. And yeah, I can't exactly claim that there isn't, obviously a leaning much more towards British history particularly, but we've had whole units on American history, obviously the World Wars, which covers quite a lot. So, there was even like a whole thing on the Weimar Republic that I didn't do, but some of my friends did. Not sure why I was exempt from that, but whatever. And even things like like the Russian Revolution and things like that. So like even most of that stuff is like early 20th century basically, but that's still a wider scope and perspective than one would than one we would expect after seeing the other results beforehand. And same with Spanish, obviously. The Spanish history that I learned was a lot to do with Spain, but teeny bits beyond, as well. So yeah, again, that's so again, something like that where people like much more in their own bubble, unable to interact with anyone outside of their own culture. They say that social media can put you in an echo chamber, which is true. But it also is one of the only ways to actively make people engage and want to engage outside of independent research themselves, which I've said before to BB when she's talked about this. I mean, she said if they're interested in if they want to learn more, they can just crack open a book, which is not as easier said than done, because people aren't always motivated to learn the same things. They've got to encounter them, be exposed to them. Would I have even learnt as much Spanish as I did if it weren't for the fact that I was going to Spain? No. So I guess that is like a physical example, granted, but even so, on some micro level, I mean, how many people have I personally met that I still interact with that I would have never had a chance to meet. And like I said before about the other communities, going back to games, actually, I can't say as much because I'm not as much of a multiplayer game person outside of some parts of Minecraft historically. But for me, obviously, that outlet was YouTube. For other people, that might have been the games like Dan Bull, for example. That's exactly what he alluded to. So again, I worry about that option being cut off entirely and not implemented in a smart way, because there are plenty of games out there that I'm sure do offer a multiplayer experience that they're going to be fine and age appropriate. I think also of people like Aphmau, for example, who met her significant other on Final Fantasy VII, was it? Like the online part of that. I mean, places like VR chat, for example. So Keir Starmer even mentioned COVID specifically. Like he said that he said that, you know, that social media addiction definitely got worse during COVID, and a lot of the incidents around compromised child safety or mental health issues came about from COVID. Which, yes, of course that was going to happen. But here's the thing, of course that was going to happen. I mean, I can personally say that, you know, during that time, like social media became even much more of a comfort to me, because again, we were all stuck at home. How else do we interact outside the world? I feel like it's like everything would have been much more chaotic if the very same pandemic that we had taken place merely like 30 or 40 years ago, you know, before the internet really became a thing or as widespread a thing. It would have just, like, you know, it would have destroyed people so much more than it actually did. The reason why some people look like fondly back at the times of, like, you know, of like, I don't know, like, you know, the Dream SMP, for example, like any of the other, like, Rise of Other People there, or, like, you know, their time spent online again, it's because that's what they had. You know, it was something to keep their minds busy. So you have to, like, weigh both sides of these kind of things, and apparently they did. Apparently Sir Keir Starmer has talked to a bunch of people, particularly parents, and has, before coming to the conclusion, making the announcement. You can choose to believe that or not, depending on if you think it was all rushed or anything. I'm just saying what he said. But he mentioned very vaguely sometimes, he said, oh, there have been benefits of social media, you know, it would be foolish to deny that. And I was like, well, okay, what are they? You know, what would they weighed against? He talked exclusively about the negatives, which is why I felt like I need to talk about the positives, aside from, again, the original plan of this video was to support that student in his protest, but I don't know if that's happening anymore. I'm sure there's a petition somewhere about this, and if I can find it, I will most certainly link it, if that is something that someone is going to put together. I will be looking into that for sure. But yeah, this is you know, what are those benefits? I mean, I feel like they're probably the ones that I essentially described. Is social media designed to be addictive? Certainly, but I feel like banning it in general, like that extreme, is definitely, even though he said it took years, definitely feels like the easy way out, because it's so easy to just be like, oh well, this thing could be a problem, like, you know, get rid of it entirely, you know, whatever, it's gone. But then for all those people who do find so much solace in it, what then? What I would have liked to have seen instead of a full ban would have been something where, you know, because clearly the Online Safety Act is saying, you know, all this age verification and such. If you did require in some way like, you know, parental approval to access like these different social medias under 16, if there was some extra safeguard behind that so that parents can make that decision before their child goes onto these places, because that's been discussed a lot since even like the Cyberbully, the movie, which came out like 2011 or something like that. There was this idea that, you know, governments were from people who didn't use the internet, so they didn't know what it was doing. Now at least it's being taken seriously, so again, I have to give them credit for that. But I feel like, again, it's something that requires a bit more of a nuanced touch than just simply a case of remove everything and, you know, hope for the best. Or that, you know, I mean, or they won't just always start using VPNs. One of the journalists that asked him questions asked about banning VPNs, including other stuff in the question, and he didn't say anything. I think he probably knows that banning VPNs is not viable, because I mean they do serve an important purpose in like actually encrypting your data, and they are an important safety tool that people use. They just happen to also allow you to change your regions in order to actually, let's be real, bypass the Online Safety Act. I'm sure there's some people that have done that. So you know, they would have definitely been on his radar beforehand. He would have mentioned something. There's no way he doesn't know what they are, for example. So I don't know. And you know, to use, some people like that, I'm going to use this example, but to use a quote from Hermione Granger, again, I guess that's on my mind today. The most surefire way to make something popular is banning it. You know, the more things are banned, the more they're going to be appealing to people in the first place, especially when it comes to something that they are actively will want to rebel against. I guarantee that student of mine is not the only one who wanted to do something major about what's going on. And to anyone that does want to do that, like, more power to you, honestly. I completely get that. There is definitely a need for greater safeguarding of particularly children online. That's absolutely the case. But I don't think this is the way that it should be done. At least personally, anyway. I'm not the only one. Apparently, there was, you know, they mentioned, well, this came about from, like, right after there was, Sir Keir Starmer actually met the father of somebody who lost their life on social media, and that's part of what sparked this. He himself, the father, did not want a ban at all. And Sir Keir Starmer did say that, you know, as much as he respects his position, it's possible to listen to somebody, understand where they're coming from, and draw a completely different conclusion. And I believe that is what I've done here today. So, more so than ever, I want to hear your thoughts. Not just the kid that I met earlier, not just that student that might not see this video, because again, I can't find him to tag him or anything. But anyone else. Anyone who would have been affected by this a few years back. Like, what has the chance to actually, you know, be on social media younger than 16 meant to you? Or alternatively, you know, maybe I'm completely off base. Do you think you personally would have been better off without it, without that kind of pressure? I've only just scratched the surface based on like the platforms that I know. You know, I'm sure that I wasn't exactly a huge Facebook user ever. I have an account, but I bet I use it to basically, again, talk to my friends from school about plans, you know, particularly that they were concerned with. Instagram, I also originally got so I could stay in contact with some people from my old drama club that never actually messaged me back, so it didn't really work, but I just had it anyway, so it's still there, I guess. But there are other things on there that I just got the service on, you know. Even Skype, and you know, the chance to like actually, you know, use that to talk with your friends online or something, you know, like even if I use that for my school friends mostly before moving to Discord and broadening those horizons even further. So there's a lot more to talk about in that aspect. And I said before I was going to come back to this, but not all social media apparently is at risk here, because they've said, for example, like YouTube Kids is safe because obviously that's designed so that you don't actually, because again, like I said before, YouTube itself already doesn't have as many like, you know, features that are approaching people or something. But I mean, YouTube Kids is definitely like at the moment the prime place for AI slop that's already not doing the world many favors at all. It was also the origin of the Spider-Man Elsa videos from 10 years ago. So those are the only two examples I can, or even, you know, Billion Surprise Toys and examples from there. If you don't know who they are, think Johnny Yes Papa. So again, not the best place to just leave off with, you know, with no other options. I'm also wondering if you can still like access YouTube as an under 16-year-old in UK if you don't log in, because YouTube right now is open for anyone. If you don't have an account, you just can't, you know, like post comments or upload videos or stuff like that. So that's also a question I have. But so Keir Starmer did say there's a proper definition of social media that they are using, which again, what is it? We don't know yet. But like I said, I want to know what everyone else thinks about like everything else we've mentioned so far. Do you think you've been better off without it at a younger age? Do you think that it has benefited you? What is your, or if nothing else, what is your favorite story of your life that came about through social media? You know, this is the time more than any other like video that I would love to hear everyone's thoughts about this, because in one way or another, you know, even if some of us aren't going to be personally affected, it's all about those that are. Maybe there'll be other countries that implement this like sometime in the future. I don't know, but you know, would you essentially want to deny you know, future generations the same opportunities that you yourself have been offered? That's another thing that it comes down to. But also, if this is not the way, as I don't think it is, then what is? Because ultimately, something does need to be done. I'm not denying that. It'd be a fool to do so. But definitely not this. Not like this. That's my 2 cents on that. And that is hopefully the last time that I will discuss politics on this YouTube channel, aside from replying to your comments in the description, because not your comments in the comments section, because I want to interact with people about that. I want to know. So let me know, and please leave a like or dislike, because your opinion matters. And subscribe if you haven't done so already. Oh, sorry, someone's trying to cross. And on that note, until next time, farewell.